So I certainly expect more and more activity to flow to the Lightning Network in the coming months and years for various reasons. Instant finality, rather than having to wait 10 minutes for a confirmation on chain or an hour for 6 confirmations on chain, you get that instant finality on Lightning that you don't on chain. Transaction fees are going to be lower on Lightning, and certainly if we ever see transaction fees start to rise again, which I think we will, that will really factor into the decision on whether you make an on-chain transaction or try to make as many transactions off-chain or on Lightning as possible. And generally it's just much more efficient use of block space. The more transactions you do off-chain with only needing a single on-chain transaction to open that Lightning channel is just maximising the utility of that block space that you're using to the absolute extreme. So, huge number of benefits, very bullish on the Lightning Network. I do think though it's important to understand the difference in the security model when using Lightning versus making an on-chain transaction. Incredibly, there isn't that much of a difference between the security or the trust minimization of Lightning versus on-chain, which was a great surprise to me at the time that this was possible. But there is a reduction that is worth exploring and understanding. So let's go through how a Lightning channel operates. You've got Alice and you've got Bob. Alice says to Bob, "Hey Bob, want to open a Lightning channel?" Bob says, "Sure, Alice. Let's send that channel open transaction to the blockchain." The transaction gets included in a block, and the Lightning channel between Alice and Bob is open. So within the Lightning channel, let's say Alice opened the channel with 1 Bitcoin. She sends 0.1 Bitcoin in the channel to Bob, so her balance is now 0.9 Bitcoin and his balance is 0.1. She then sends another 0.1 Bitcoin, so her balance becomes 0.8 and his balance becomes 0.2. She sends 0.2, her balance becomes 0.6 and his becomes 0.4. But then Bob sends a transaction back to Alice for 0.4 within this Lightning channel. So the latest state of the Lightning channel now is back to what it was at the beginning, right? There's 1 Bitcoin at Alice's end and 0 Bitcoin at Bob's end. Now, what Bob can do is Bob can send one of the earlier states to the blockchain and try to close the channel with the balances that are more beneficial to him, right? If he sends the state of the Lightning channel before he sent 0.4 Bitcoin back to Alice, he's still got 0.4 Bitcoin in this channel at that state. So he attempts to close the channel with old balances of Alice having 0.6 Bitcoin and Bob having 0.4. Now, the way Lightning deals with this is that as part of the operation of the channel, Alice has a justice transaction that she can broadcast if she spots Bob trying to close the channel with an old prior state, right? So this really keeps the trust minimization very close to the trust minimization that you have on chain, with no explicit reliance on trusted third parties. But what Alice does need to do in the Lightning setting that she doesn't have to do in the on-chain setting is monitor the blockchain continuously, ideally 24/7, but certainly she doesn't want to be offline for days without any view of the blockchain. And if she does spot any funny business from Bob, she needs to be ready to broadcast that justice transaction that least pre-L2, we won't go into L2, will seize the funds that Bob is trying to steal from her. Okay, so this kind of corrects the misbehaviour from Bob and ensures that Alice gets all the money in the channel. So yeah, quite ingenious how it works. Like you would expect it's very easy to think about a bar tab, right? If you go to a bar and you set up a tab with the bartender and you steadily buy drinks throughout the night, it's very easy to think, oh, well, you could do that on chain in a trusted setting, right? You open a channel up with the bartender for, say, 10 drinks. If you only drink 5, then you close out with balance paying for 85 drinks. But the real ingenuity within Lightning is that you don't have to trust that bartender. You have a way of going to the blockchain, a kind of blockchain justice system where if one of the two parties does cheat, you can correct that cheat attempt and ensure that you don't lose the money that you're entitled to. So it's quite ingenious how it works, but it does introduce requirements that you don't have on chain, namely monitoring the chain, monitoring for cheat attempts from Bob, and also needing a way to broadcast the justice transaction if required. On chain, you don't have that requirement. You just have the requirement of, okay, you have a private key associated with an address. Don't let anyone see that private key. Don't lose that private key. If you let other people see your private key or lose your private key, then you'll lose your funds. Lightning has that requirement, and it has this additional, you need to monitor the chain and you need to be able to broadcast the justice transaction if required. So yeah, that's the difference with the security models between on-chain and Lightning.